Hello and welcome to DEI Advisors. My name is Lan Elliott on behalf of DEI Advisors. And today our guest is Andrea Belfanti, who is the CEO of ISHC, which stands for the International Society of Hospitality Consultants, which includes over 200 invitation-only members. And I'm really glad I got to meet Andrea while we were both volunteering for Castell at college. But Andrea, I've never had a chance to hear your stories, so I'm really excited to hear them, and welcome, Andrea.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
So Andrea, you've had a very successful career. Can you share a bit of some of the inflection points in your career and perhaps what you think were the factors or skills that contributed to your success?
Yeah, that's a great, it's funny thinking back, because I feel like I'm just starting out in my career. I'm very young. I'm not old enough. Age is a funny thing, right? But I'll start at the beginning. So when I started college, I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I took an introduction to hospitality class, and honestly, I was hooked. That was it. I ended up doing an internship at Walt Disney World, and again, thought this is it. I want to be in hospitality. I want to take care of people. So that was kind of what got me started. And then throughout my career, I wish I could say that the factors were just me being really great and smart and always making the right decision. But I think it has just as much or really a lot more to do with luck and timing. I was in hospitality. I was in the hotel space working for a major brand and during the Great Recession, and was laid off, and which at the time was horrible, right? But it forced me to change my path and look at other opportunities. And so that's how I started with ISHC. So I think I've tried to work really hard. I've tried to be a good human and treat people well and create good, genuine relationships. But the reality is it's luck and timing, right? So all the stuff you can't control, I think, is what got me where I am today.
I think you mentioned hard work, and I think that is probably a part of it as well. Can't forget that you also did a lot of that. Can we talk a little bit? You mentioned some setbacks. Can we talk about setbacks, and maybe if you could share an example of when things didn't go your way and how you found the courage and eventually prevailed?
Yeah, first of all, we could talk about examples from today and yesterday, right? And how I think in our world today, or just this industry or life in general, we have to deal with challenges and setbacks all the time. I mentioned being laid off. That was at the time one of the hardest things I'd ever been through, because I had put so much of my worth and value in my job, and to an unhealthy degree, right? So it felt like a really bad breakup. It was a gut punch for sure, but what an amazing lesson, right? So now I love my job and I'm passionate about my job. And I think most of us in this industry have to have some sort of calling or passion. But I also know that it can't be where I find my worth and value, right? You have to have interests outside of work. You have to have things that you love and things that you spend time on. I remember back in those days, someone would be like, "What are your hobbies? What are you passionate about?" And I would be like, "Work. What do you have time for? What do you mean, what are my hobbies? Checking my BlackBerry? I don't know. Like what?" So I think, that going through that tough time was, I call it the Control Alt Delete. It reset my perspective, my priorities, and helped me, to reevaluate where I am, where I was, and where I wanted to be. Yeah.
How do you generally approach a challenge? I'm really curious how you first approach it. What do you do, and how do you process it? If your team is working on a challenge, how do you motivate them? More generally, how do you handle a challenge?
Yeah, that's such a good question. So in thinking through this, I realized it sounds funny, but I like to start with the worst case scenario. I like to start with, how bad can this get? So if I'm approaching a challenge, or if there's an obstacle, how can this go? right? So am I going to lose my job? Are people going to be unemployed? Whatever it is, what's the worst case scenario? And then work back from there. Um, in small steps. My husband says that I love a plan. He loves to joke with me about that. I also love a backup plan because that can take away some anxiety, right? So whether it's a small obstacle or a big obstacle, it's right, here's the ideal situation. Here's the best way out of this problem. But let's think if the best doesn't happen. What's the worst case? And let's kind of prepare for that also. And then for me, especially when talking through with team members or other people, it's really about not being reactive. So when the proverbial poop hits the fan or things get stressful, don't react right away, right? Take some deep breaths, take a step back. What's the first step, right? So you get laid off. So the first step, let's get your resume together. Let's not think through, 12 steps ahead. So, so that's me, right? Begin with the end in mind, but also what's the worst case end and how can we prepare for that? And then start small and make a plan.
I love having a plan too. I'm a planner and I make lists too. So I get all of that. Yeah, I love a list.
I love it. Yeah.
And I love how you mentioned earlier about how our identities can be really wrapped up in our business cards. And there is something, it takes a while before you really figure out how to separate who you are from what's on your business card. And it's something that becomes much, much more important over time.
That's right. And honestly, I think sometimes we have to do that daily or weekly, right? It's, wait a minute, I'm stressed out. This is affecting my personal life in ways that it shouldn't. I need to take a step back and remember that this is a job. Yeah. Easier said than done, but can be done.
It is, especially when you're in the thick of it, right?
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about developing relationships, because one of the things that makes the hospitality industry so wonderful is that you meet people in work or while you're doing things, and you actually develop friendships in this industry. And I don't know if that's the way with other industries, because I've never wanted to work anywhere else. But can you share a bit about how you built your network and how you do it in a way that feels authentic to you?
Yeah. I don't think it can't be this good in other industries, right? I don't know many other people that have so many good personal friends that they met through the industry, but that's my opinion. Networking, that word, the networking kind of makes my shoulders tense up a little bit when you think of it in the classical sense of walking into a networking function with a stack of business cards and here's what I do. What do you do? Okay, we're not a match. Move to the next person and giving your elevator pitch. And I'm a fairly extroverted person. So the fact that makes me uncomfortable, I can only imagine. So my old boss, the woman that hired me at ISHC, is a woman named Lori Raleigh, and she is just one of the best people. She's certainly the best boss I've ever worked for. And the way she networked, I still use today what I learned from her. So for me, she wouldn't say it this way, but it's really taking the focus off of yourself for me. So if I walk into a room, one of the classical networking receptions or at a conference, who here doesn't look like they know anyone, right? So instead of trying to find there's that guy, I've been trying to talk with him, I think I can get a business from him. There's a woman standing over there by the bar who obviously doesn't know anyone. Let's go talk to her. So, and then when you start talking to people, talk to them about things that actually matter. Not just what do you do? Who do you do it for? Can you introduce me to, or do you have any business for me? Right. But actually get to know people. And then it's less networking. It's spending time with people and getting to know people. And I love that. That sounds great. I want to talk to people, and people in our industry are typically people that I want to spend time with. So that feels much more comfortable to me than networking. And then I think it's also about follow-up in a genuine way. Again, it's not like we met at this reception, you said you might have a deal in blah, 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 but more, oh, hey, I saw this article. You mentioned that your son's going to this college, and I just saw that they were ranked number one. Congratulations, you must be proud. Or you mentioned that you're traveling to so-and-so. Here's this great restaurant that I mentioned. And again, it's developing relationships and getting to know people and having it not be all about work and what you can do for me and what they can do for you. Yeah.
Really wonderful advice to really connect with people on a human level rather than just, again, separating your identity from your business card, right? And connecting with people as
Yes,
people first. So
I think so.
wonderful
Yeah.
advice. Wonderful advice from an extrovert.
Yeah. That's right.
Let's
Yeah.
talk a little bit about support systems. One of the concepts that we've discussed here on DEI Advisors has been having a board of directors, a personal board of directors, the people that you turn to when you need support to get over a challenge, build you up, what have you. How do you identify who is part of your support system? When do you call on them? What types of things do you call on them for?
Yeah, so the people that I put in the support in that kind of personal board of directors are people that I know are going to be honest with me, but also they're going to be kind, right? We all have those friends that you can call and say, "Should I take this trip? Should I spend this money?" And they're going to say, "Yes, absolutely. Of course you should do that. You deserve that. Spend all the money, do all the things." And those people are great. But there's also at some point when you need some reality checks, whether it's, I think I may have screwed up in handling this situation. And you don't want to always call the person that says, "No, that was them. It's never you." You need to call the people that say, "Gosh, yeah, it sounds like you could have handled that a little better. But your intentions were good. So let's talk about how we can make it better," kind of thing. So it's that honest and kind combination. Because I know I certainly, you want to call the people that are going to be kind all the time, 100%. But you need that accountability. I think that's what those people should be in your life, is kind of help hold you accountable and speak truth when you don't want to hear it. And then when to call them, I think there's the obvious. I'm making a big decision. I'm struggling with, what to do in this big situation. But I think there's also the small stuff. I'm feeling uneasy about some stuff this week. It's not big, but there's something not right. Is it just that I, am stressed out or burnt out, or is my gut feeling something here? So, it kind of goes back to that relationship piece that I think hopefully you've built a relationship with people that you can call for big stuff and small stuff, and that you've also been there for them for big stuff and small stuff. Because we can't, I think, especially in today's world, right? You think about the pandemic and being locked down, the level of stress that our bodies and brains and work and everything else went through. You have to have more checks and balances, I think.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
true. And that's actually a theme we've heard a few times, that when you surround yourself with people who will tell you the truth, right? That piece of accountability. And
Mhm.
I've had a few senior leaders say, especially as you get more senior, people are less likely to tell you the bad things as you go, up the ladder, and you do need people in your board of directors who are going to be real with you, and in a kind way, like you said. But it is
Yeah.
so important, especially if you are, the more senior you are and the more people who want to just please you who are around you, it's great to be able to turn to people when you're not sure, who will give you the real
Yeah.
the real
I don't
story.
think I'm to the point where people aren't being honest with me. I'm still getting I'm still hearing the truth from people.
You're still getting enough feedback on a daily basis.
Still getting plenty of feedback. I think I'm good there, but yeah.
But sometimes our biggest critics are actually ourselves, right? And so I wanted to talk a little bit about how you stay positive, because sometimes those voices in your head can get really loud. And I found it interesting that these voices don't actually go away. I think my 22-year-old self would have thought, when you're older, you don't have these negative voices. But actually, I found, as we've done these interviews, that they stick around. So you need strategies of how to deal with them, to stay positive, to overcome that internal narrative.
Yeah.
What do you do for that?
Gosh, that's a really good point, Lan. I didn't think about that. I think like early career person watching the leaders panel on stage, you'd never guess that
Right.
they had people, their voices in their heads were negative also.
Yeah.
So for me, I know my negative voice gets louder when I'm tired, when I'm hungry, when I'm stressed out, whether that's personal, professional, when I haven't taken enough time off. So the first thing I do if I notice that I'm kind of beating myself up is take a step back and think, what else could be contributing to this? And then try to right some of those wrongs, right? Take a day off, go for a walk, eat a meal, whatever it is that might be contributing to it. And then once I feel like I can be a little more objective, then I want to try to dissect whatever's going on. So am I beating myself up about an email I sent, or I should have said this, or did I come across the wrong way here? Figure out where's the reality in that. And it's hard, right? But to be as objective as possible. And then I read long ago, I heard someone say or read it, and I swear it's on permanent rotation in my brain. At least once a week, I say to myself, you made the best decision you could with the information you had at the time. You handled yourself the best you could considering the situation. And then try to, show some kindness to myself and move on. If there's still something that's like, actually, I think I really did screw that up. I maybe should have done that better. That's where I think that board of directors comes into play. We can say, here's a situation. Did I do this? Did I do this? Am I prepared for this? Am I qualified for this? Whatever the negative voice is telling you, I know like a lot of people, at least people I know, you play that one situation over and over again in your head. I should have said, did that come across wrong? So that's where I, try to think through it, talk to an objective bystander if need be. And then if I've screwed up, call and say, hey, we talked last week and I really didn't handle that well. I wanted you to know this is what I meant. And then do your best to move on, right? That constant tape and the constant negative voice takes up way too much energy in the background. Okay. So that's what I try to do. Eliminate the other variables, get some sleep, eat some food, take a deep breath, dissect the situation on my own. If I can't get to a conclusion, bring somebody else in and then make it right or get over it. That's the ideal situation. Fix it or move on.
Such fantastic advice. I love that it starts with self-care, right? To go back and see, are you at your optimal right now? And if not, how can you fix that so that you can start from there? And I love how tactical you are about it, actually.
It's amazing what a good night's sleep and a decent meal can do for you, right? I notice, especially, so we're recording this in December, the holiday season. I'm like, did I have an extra glass of wine last night? Is that why I'm really beating myself up? Did I go to that holiday party? So yeah, you've got to think through the logistics and then do the work. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Sure.
A common generalization that's out there is that women don't do a good job advocating for themselves. And that's part of the challenge in seeing women elevated to the C-suite, getting promotions, that sort of thing. What would you tell people who are struggling to find their voice?
Same, first of all. Yeah, it's hard, right? I think there's 1,000,001 studies and books, so we don't have to get into the fact that as women, we were, raised to be quiet and not ask for too much and to be sweet, right? We're sweet. That's what we are. Yeah. And it doesn't feel sweet to ask for a promotion or to ask for more money. It doesn't, that doesn't feel like what a proper woman does. So I can tell you what's worked for me is I approach it like a research project. So let's say when I've said I want to raise or title change, something that practical, I will read all the articles. I'll look at compensation studies. I'll do web research to see what other people with similar responsibilities are being called, if I can find out what they're being paid, and I'll make my case before I even talk to anyone, right? It's almost like I need to convince myself, which is a shame, but that's what has to happen, right? So I'll do all of that. I'll convince myself, and then I'll write my script. I'll write my talking points. I'll practice. So again, I'm feeling more confident. I'm sounding more confident. But even if I don't sound confident, you still got to say it, right? There's the bumper sticker, speak up even if your voice shakes kind of thing. And I think there's real value in that. So I do the practical stuff to kind of internally convince myself and change myself. And then when I sit down to say, hey, I think I'd like to look at my compensation, I'm not not sure, but could we possibly, I'm more like, no, here's all the research. now I'm like, oh no, you're just going to give this to me because I'm making the case. I've already proved this is the way to go. So for me, it's preparation, 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 preparation. I also think there's real value in, I get hung up with, I should have said something in the moment. When that came up, I should have said. And then I'm like, ugh, all right, never mind. And I move on. I think we can fix that, right? You can go back and say, hey, 2 weeks ago in that meeting when this was said, I've been thinking about it and I wanted to come back to you. Right. So even if I am not a spontaneous, I don't deal with things in the moment. I process, process, process. I plan, I research, I do these things, but that doesn't mean that I have to miss opportunities. I also think it's really important for us to be advocating for other women in underrepresented groups. And that can be, I've tried to, I'm certainly not flawless at it by far, but I've tried to, if I have a phone call or an email exchange with a junior person that goes really well, I've tried to call their boss or email their boss, or the next time I see him say, hey, I talked with Jane about X, Y, and Z. She's really wonderful. You need to do whatever you need to do to keep her. You need, just put that little plug in.
Right.
And then maybe when Jane goes to ask for a raise or a promotion, their boss is like, oh yeah, that's right. People are saying, just kind of put those little, think that we need to do a better job for ourselves, but I also think we can easily help those people around us. And it doesn't have to be,
that suggestion. Yeah.
Yeah. And you don't have to be a boss to do that, right? You can be peers and say in a meeting, gosh, that was a great idea. That's great. You can say these things. It doesn't have to be a big deal. It doesn't have to be a formal situation.
Yeah. And I think that's so great, this idea of just reaching out and sharing a positive experience with someone's boss or in that moment, just to lift other people up. I think it also gives you a boost, right? When you do something nice for someone else in that way. So
Yeah,
also makes you feel
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
You had talked a little bit earlier about being sweet, that people expect girls to be sweet, but that expectation kind of carries forward as you get older as well. It's part of what's taught when you're little. And this idea is out there of an assertiveness double bind, where women are either too nice and kind, and then you're not strong enough to do the job or do the next job, or you're too assertive and that doesn't come across well, and then that makes you not likable, and that also impedes your ability to progress and do things.
Yeah.
Is this something you've ever encountered? And if so, how do you balance how to do this?
I don't know anyone that hasn't encountered this, any female. Honestly, some men too, right? But I think this is absolutely a thing. And first, so I'm someone that got into hospitality because I love taking care of people. I love that side of the business. And so that is, we talked about that sweetness. That's like meek and in the background. And I'm not going to draw attention to myself. I am not that. I am more of I want to do everything I can to take care of people, which is also seen as a weakness, right? It's not seen as being assertive or boss-like. And I have absolutely struggled with that throughout my career. But first, I will say, I do think this is changing to some degree. I can think of more women now in senior leadership roles that have a reputation of being nice, of someone that you'd actually want to spend time with, but are also powerful and successful. So I do think in some ways it's changing. Second, I think more than us needing to talk about how we can change as women, I think we need to talk about the system in our companies, and how we can set up environments that encourage people to be their authentic self and try to work on some of these biases that we have. That takes time. So, in the meantime, I've certainly encountered all this. And I think that we need to make sure that people around us are taken care of, right? I think that as a leader, you can say, this person's personality is a little stronger. So I'm going to make sure that they're not coming across a certain way, or that other people around them understand, or I'm going to change the dynamic that really highlights their strengths. And then you can look at someone that says, this person is a little quieter and is a little more nurturing, but they're very smart. They have strong leadership skills, and so create environments that really can showcase strengths and weaknesses. And so to me, it's more like, instead of, I was told, you're being too nice. You need to be a little stronger. You need to be a little more aggressive. You need to be more boss-like. And maybe that situation could have read, I love that you're taking care of people. Let's also make sure no one's walking all over you. Because I think you can absolutely be a boss that is kind and caring and has boundaries and is respected and holds people accountable. And what again, in our world today, the fact that like being nice is seen as a weakness is just a bummer. It's just a real bummer, right? And taking care of yourself and holding boundaries and saying, I'm sorry, I'm not going to put up with that. That's not acceptable, is seen as a negative also, right? It's seen as being aggressive and, too bossy, whatever. We've got to change our paradigm.
Another word that gets used, right? Too difficult.
Too difficult. Yeah. And it's we need to be finding environments that say, I'm allowing you to be who you are. And I'm going to help you in the case if you really are not holding your boundaries, if you really are not holding people accountable, let's work on that. Let's not take away your niceness. Let's not criticize the fact that you are a decent human. Let's add some skills to you. And if you really are holding your boundaries and holding people accountable, that should be seen as a positive. And if you're rubbing a bunch of people the wrong way and it's genuine, it's not just stereotypes, then let's work on softening that while keeping your boundaries. We've got to find the balance and help people be their best selves.
Completely agree.
Yeah.
Completely agree.
I should say, I don't know that I should say what's worked for me is to continue to be kind and strong. It's the kindness and the strength. I can tell you no in a very kind way, but I'm still going to tell you no.
Right.
That kind of thing. Yeah.
That's great. You alluded to it a little bit in the conversation we just had, but one of the things I wanted to dig into a bit more is creating an inclusive culture with the idea that allows diverse people to be their authentic selves and to thrive. Mm-hmm. You recently co-founded the ISHC and QuestX Diversity and Inclusion Council. Can you share the story behind why the council was set up and what its goals are?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. So like a lot of people, the murder of George Floyd and the racial justice movement that was heightened after that was, I'm embarrassed to say, very eye-opening for me. So I, in the wake of that, started doing the work, right? Reading the books and listening to the podcasts and talking to people, doing all of that. And I was like, okay, I'm motivated. I want to make change. Okay, but how do you make change? And then it got a little discouraging because I don't know how to reform our policing system in the US. I don't know how to change systemic racism. But the more I think about it and the more I talk to people, it was like, well, I do have connections in hospitality. I do know some people and I've been doing this a long time. So maybe I can do something in my little bubble. So the purpose of the council is to help create a more diverse and sound future where employees and guests feel welcome and find belonging. The great Ashley Johnson, I don't know if you know Ashley, but she's with Howard University, the Marriott Sorensen Center for Hospitality Leadership at Howard University. Whew. She said it best that we don't have a diversity problem in our industry. We have an equity and inclusion problem. So we created the council to help provide resources, to help make sure people were still talking about it, and to really do whatever we can to help make that change.
That's amazing. Yeah, so we've had Ashley on our show as well. I interviewed her a while back, and she is phenomenal. She really is, and really good for Howard to have her there.
Yes.
So, as part of this, what things or what can managers and leaders do to create a more inclusive workplace? What should they do if they're, for example, managing a diverse team for the first
Yeah.
time?
Well, first I'll say congratulations on having a diverse team. If this is your first time, you probably had to, change some of your paradigms and do things a different way to get more diversity on your team. So that's amazing, right? Step one, check. Problem is that's not where it stops. Like we were talking about, that equity and inclusion piece is really important. So I am not an expert, right? I'm not a DE&I advisor. I'm not a consultant, but I can tell you what has helped me and what I've seen work well is to do the work. Unfortunately, this type of change doesn't happen with good intentions. You've got to do the work, right? I can have good intentions all day long, and my new diverse team is going to be miserable. So, I think where we are, at least for me and a lot of the people I know, we tend to talk to, hang out with, work with, watch movies, read books, our social media feeds, they're all about and by people that look like us. So my advice is to broaden your horizons. And that can be race, that can be gender, sexual orientation, physical ability. I listened to a podcast on ableism and my mind was blown because I don't have a lot of people with disabilities in my life. So that's, which is a whole other issue, but that's a whole other podcast episode. But, to read books and do the things and talk to people outside of your friend group, outside of your work group that look different, that act different, that have different priorities. I think there's huge value in expanding your horizons. It helps you see people. It helps you understand what they're going through, how to communicate better. And then again, keep doing the work, right? If you need to hire consultants, hire consultants. If you need to have tough, uncomfortable, I call them sweaty conversations, have those conversations. And then be the example, right? So if you're in a meeting and somebody is speaking up and somebody else got interrupted, stop. And again, you don't have to be the boss to do that. Say, oh, I'm sorry, Peter, just 1 second. Jane was still talking about her idea about whatever. Or I don't understand what you're saying. Can you help me understand? That's an interesting perspective. I hadn't thought of that before. Tell me more. So asking those questions, and then as a leader, being very prepared, willing, and able to say, I screwed up. That was my fault. I didn't think about that. Thank you for explaining it to me. Let's change course and move on. Whatever it is, so that your team can see that you are open, willing, able, and want to create different environments. I think, and then you can't tolerate anything that's outside of what you want, right? Outside of that, of your goal. So in that meeting, when Peter interrupts Jane for the 4th time, or if Peter is disrespectful to Jane, you have to say something. You have to say, I'm sorry, Peter, that was unacceptable. We'll talk later. Whatever it is, it's hard though. But again, change doesn't happen with good intentions. You've got to do the work, and it's going to be really uncomfortable. Like honestly, talking about it, I get red. Like I get red and sweaty just talking about it, because that's not what we were raised to do. It's like, we talked about little girls being raised to be sweet. We're raised not, don't talk about race. Don't talk about sexual orientation. Don't talk about all these things. They make people feel uncomfortable. Yeah. Well, we've got to talk about it. We've got to feel uncomfortable, or change isn't going to happen. So yeah. I think, leaders need to do the work, and then you need to be very willing to be uncomfortable and to admit when you're wrong, make the change, and keep moving forward.
Yeah. There's a big part of vulnerability in that, right? To be willing to be vulnerable and to say, I'm still learning. I'm working on doing the work, it, being a work in progress, and it's okay. But it needs to be more than just having good intentions. Just hiring somebody isn't enough. So that's right. I love those additional thoughts.
Yeah. And those, and you have to be able to be vulnerable, and then you have to do the work to actually make the change, right? So just saying, I'm sorry, I'm still learning is great, but are you still learning? Yeah. Right. Are you still doing the work on your own to actually learn and do better and understand situations better?
So true. Yeah. Thank you for that. So one of the things we love to ask, one of my favorite questions actually on DEI advisors is, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Yeah, so was thinking about this question. I'm like, where was I when I was 22? And it's funny, I thought, gosh, I was broke. I was spending shopping was my holiday, right? I would get off. I was usually off on Sundays and Mondays because I was working in operations, and I would go to the mall. And I say all that to say that I wish that I wish I had better financial stability. And I wish I'd made better financial decisions, not so that I could buy more stuff now, but so that I think financial stability can help you make decisions or can right. So if you've got money in the bank and you're not living paycheck to paycheck, maybe you don't have to take the first job that's offered to you. You can
Yeah.
wait for the job that you really want. You can choose a job based on the culture and what you're going to learn rather than how much money you're making. Plus, the idea of being able to retire at some point, all that sounds great. So I wish somebody had whispered in my ear, like, get your financial act together. The other thing that I think when I was kind of thinking back to then and now and where I thought I would be and what I thought I wanted, I think there's more than one path to success and happiness, right? And if I had really known that and accepted that, I probably would have saved myself a whole lot of anxiety, you know?
Yeah, it goes hand in hand though with being people who like to make plans and lists, right? So you have a plan and you think this is the plan, and you might have a plan B, but I think also the counterpoint to that is being open to possibilities and learning things along the way, and new job opportunities that you had never thought
Yeah.
about before. So
Yeah, and being excited about those opportunities instead of, but this isn't the plan. But I don't know, the plan. Yeah, I think, yeah, being open to those opportunities. I probably would have told myself to, like, take a day off every now and then too, maybe, I don't know, more practical advice, just take a day off. That sounds nice.
that's
Yeah.
great advice. Well, I know I can talk to you for a long, long time, and hopefully I will get to do that in the very near future. But as we are coming to the end of our time together, could you share perhaps one final piece of advice, keeping in mind that the mission of DEI advisors is around empowering personal success? What advice would you offer to women and underrepresented groups who are looking to advance their careers?
Yeah, so, um, I would say for me, one of the things looking back kind of at my list of jobs and the places I've worked, it's really paid off for me to prioritize working with people and companies that I trust and respect. Right. So there's a lot that goes into choosing careers. There's money and benefits and tuition reimbursement. All those sound really amazing. Title, but there's also the quality of the people and the company that you're working for. Um, I think, when it comes to women and underrepresented groups in particular, I think we as leaders in the industry have a lot more work to do than those individuals have to do. But I think that's a piece of it. I also think we're in this amazing time right now where a lot of people are eager to see change in our industry. A lot of leaders, I mean, what you all are doing is amazing, but there's a lot of leaders that want to see change. So for younger people looking to move up, find those people. They're ready to help you. We're all looking for ways to help and support and to change our industry. And I think, the kind of grassroots way we can change is to get really great people in the industry and moving up. And I think most leaders know that now. So I would say ask for help, find the people that want to see change and get them to help you, and then find really good people and good companies to work for and with.
Fantastic advice.
Yeah,
Thank you
thanks.
so much, Andrea. And I do agree. I do think we have this moment in time. It feels a little bit like lightning in a bottle. So
Yeah,
hopefully people will have many more opportunities going forward than had been in the past. So
absolutely.
thank you so much. All right. So for our viewers, if you have enjoyed this interview with Andrea, I hope you will Check us out on deiadvisors.org, where you can find additional interviews. And Andrea, our guest for today, thank you so much for wonderful advice that you've shared with everybody today.
Thank you, Lan.